Here to share more about this year's Better Planet Challenge, PSEG CEO Ralph Izzo. Ralph, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
It's great to see you, Aaron. It's great to be back again. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back. We really appreciate the partnership with PSEG. I know we can't tell for real where you are, but I've always started these questions with, or these interviews with, where in the world geographically are you actually situated at the moment?
No, so I'm in central New Jersey, and there is a central New Jersey. I'm at home in the PSEG service territory. So it's great to see the computers working, the power's on, and everything is fine. It's a dreary day right now, but it's bright sunshine speaking to you, Aaron. How's that?
That's great. Well, happy Earth Day. It's great to see you. This year's challenge is focused on electrified transportation. Why is that so important to New Jersey?
Well, first of all, it's important for a variety of reasons. From an environmental point of view, as you're probably aware, I'm sure you're aware, transportation is the number one emitter of carbon in New Jersey. And then in general, obviously, as efficient as internal combustion engines have become, they do emit other pollutants as well. And New Jersey, being the most densely populated state in the nation, does have some commuting challenges and does have some air quality challenges. So electrification of transportation would go a long way to solving some of those environmental challenges.
New Jersey certainly has some challenges with transportation. And I think you put it very kindly compared to how maybe some of my neighbors may refer to some of the transportation challenges around the state. Why is this issue important to you and important to PSEG?
Well, when you look at the conditions in New Jersey, it really does result in you scratching your head to say, why don't we have more electric vehicles in the state and derive those benefits that we just alluded to a moment ago? We have this high population density, short commuting distances, a mass transit system that's functional but not ubiquitous. And candidly, right now, electric vehicles are not affordable for everyone, but we have a high per capita income population in the state. And yet we're, I think, 11th or 12th in the nation in electric vehicle penetration per unit of population. So we've always prided ourselves as a company in providing universal access to things that can make people's lives better. And 100 years ago, that meant natural gas, and 80 years ago, that meant electricity. And today, increasingly, it means things like energy efficiency, which we've talked about in the past, and now electric transportation, which is the topic for today. So any role we can play in helping to improve that electric vehicle penetration or electric transportation writ large is something that I think will benefit the state, and we just love to make that available to as many people as possible.
I appreciate that you talk about the ability and the desire to make a positive impact on people's lives. I've also heard you talk about no one really thinks about the utility until their electricity doesn't work. And it seems like as we get towards the electrified future, obviously, PSEG's role in this is quite significant, critical. We've talked about how do we make sure that we create that impact for all residents of the state and for the region in general. So how do you think about creating solutions or bringing to market solutions that have an equitable impact that don't leave certain communities behind?
Yeah, so that's a huge part of everything we do, and we want to make that a huge part of electric transportation as well. There are some pretty obvious ways to electrifying mass transit, for example, making sure that the urban centers, which are areas of congestion, have more commuters using electric vehicles so the air quality in those urban centers can change. But that's the exciting part about working with your team, Aaron, is that there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that probably have ideas that we would love to see brought to fruition to, as the phrase goes, bend the price curve to make it more affordable, to have all components of the population of all of our demographics have access to electric transportation. But even in the absence of those innovative, creative solutions that could maybe make charging less expensive or the vehicle less expensive, there are things we could do today from the point of view, as I said a moment ago, public transportation and more electric vehicles in the congested urban areas, enhancing air quality.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, right? We talked earlier about, in retrospect, Wex Energy as a winner last year around some of the challenge statements that we put forth made sense. And as we've thought about or surmised on what might come up this year, I've shared, I think it's not so obvious. It's the tech entrepreneur often that finds the problems to these solutions. I'm curious what your experience was what it was like working with the TechUnited community last year and how it met or hopefully exceeded your expectations.
Yeah, so as one of the largest utilities in the nation, quite candidly, we don't have any shortage of large companies knocking on our door saying, what do you think of this new turbine? What do you think of this new transformer? Multi-million dollar investments. But small companies will often say to us, getting on your preferred vendor list, getting into your supply chain network is a bit of a challenge. And it's the old adage, right? Nobody ever gets fired for buying from IBM. At least that's something people used to say when I was younger. Maybe they don't say that anymore. So getting more intimate with the entrepreneurial community, meeting 59 companies as a result of last year's challenge is something that is, I won't say it's completely new to us, but something that we don't practice quite so often. And then being able to work with WEX with their window pane treatment and the ability to help reduce heat loss through one of the primary avenues for heat loss is something that really wouldn't have happened had we not engaged the way we did last year. And I'm sure that we're going to have a similar story to tell this year.
I can't tell you how proud it makes me to hear you say that, because the reason that we work on these kinds of partnerships is to do exactly what you just described, to accelerate opportunity with small companies who struggle to knock on the doors of big companies, as you mentioned, and see if we can create real opportunity. So I can't stress enough how much we appreciate the relationship with PSEG, with TechUnited, and really the tech community, because I do believe this is the critical linchpin of what will make New Jersey break out in the tech community. And I hope that other large corporate CEOs in the region follow your lead in this regard. I'm not just saying that. That's been my theory in how I believe we can propel the tech community of this region, and I appreciate your support there. On the flip side, what have you learned about PSEG in trying to bring innovation, which I'm sure you've done outside of WEX Energy, but in regards to this experience, in trying to bring something external from a smaller company inside the doors of a PSEG?
I found that when we deal with the entrepreneur, we do have to serve two masters. On the one hand, we're delighted to meet people who can come up with innovative solutions to customer problems, like not wanting to pay extra money for having your home heating the neighborhood. On the other hand, there are a whole variety of regulatory standards and conditions that we have to meet that then, candidly, to the entrepreneur may seem bureaucratic. What underwriting lab has measured the effectiveness of your technology? Is it tamper resistant? How easy is it to install? How much training do we have to put our folks through to have them do this? So there's a little bit of that procedure-bound aspect of working with us that I'm sure may be a source of frustration for the entrepreneur, which we have to constantly rein ourselves in and realize that, okay, we're dealing with someone that doesn't have the resources of our typical vendors, a General Electric, a Siemens, folks like that. So we're having to navigate those waters together, and I think I know we're getting better at that, and I promise we will continue to emphasize that. But I do think that helps the entrepreneur as well, because they won't have to then go through and relearn those hoops when they deal with some other large utility, which will impose the same burdens on them.
It's interesting to hear you talk about it the way that you do. I think your empathy towards what the entrepreneur may see as frustration is a learning process that does do exactly what you described, right? A startup and an entrepreneur is about finding product market fit. When they work with a large corporation like a PSEG, they find scale. And so working through those kinks with the PSEG, sets them up for success to find scale. So, having spoken to WEX, and we talked with them earlier today in this program, I know they've been really thrilled with the results here and appreciate the commitment, regardless of what, may seem to you as a frustration. They had nothing like that to share.
Well, that's great to hear, because I remember when I was talking to my team also in preparation, said, how are we doing? Immediate feedback. So I go, we've had 9 meetings with them. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, that may not necessarily be a good sign, right? Maybe after the second meeting, we ought to have a couple of deployments. But I'm glad to hear it. And I have no doubt that once we get the right rating system in place, that we'll be able to deploy that technology and save customers some money and save the planet from some carbon emissions.
I think that they appreciate the diligence, because if I believe they understand that once it will work with PSEG, they can bring it to other markets. So the fact that they have a friendly ear in a partner here is part of the point. They have a little bit more of a partnership than the risk of, you just get kicked out of the meeting and that's that. So I think they appreciate that. We've talked about the utility of the future, and I'm curious how you see, innovation plays a role here. You're not just sitting back letting the market, show the way. What do you see as the utility of the future? In particular, we're going to talk more about this a little bit later with Rob Capito of BlackRock. When you think about some of the goals around 2030, 2035, 2050, how does the utility play a role there?
So there are, if I just use climate change as one motivating factor, and there are others, obviously, but that is a huge driver as we look to the future. And what that is going to create is a tremendous incentive to electrify transportation, to invest in renewable technology. And despite the fact that I'm a huge fan of renewable technology, the wind blows when it wants to blow and the sun shines when it wants to shine. And often that corresponds to when people want electricity, but not always. We refer to that as dispatchability, the absence of dispatchability. And there'll be an interest on the part of some folks to do things on their own, whether that's energy efficiency, whether that's rooftop solar. What that means is suddenly the grid is going to be a lot less centrally planned. And there's going to be a lot more unpredictability associated with it, either because of the dispatch problem of renewables or because of the individual decisions of self-supply, distributed technologies, as we call it. So the robustness of the grid, the flexibility of the grid, and the ability of utilities to manage the information associated with all of these new disparate sources of both supply and changes in demand is what's going to be the fundamental change that you see going forward. We will become, I still think it's very logically a natural monopoly from the point of view of a platform manager, not necessarily from the point of view of we're the only ones that own power plants. That's long gone. But the one who's coordinating the information flows so that these resources can meet the overall needs of society universally, I think will be the role of that utility going forward. So it'll be as much an information utility as it will be a wires utility.
In hearing you speak about that and the idea that the sun shines when it wants to shine, I think about from the entrepreneurial's perspective, we often have to will the sun to shine regardless, which is kind of the point of this challenge. Even if you can't, sometimes you feel like, one must. But right. Why should entrepreneurs apply to win this year's BetterPlanet Challenge?
Well, because I do think that transportation in particular is the next huge challenge from a climate change point of view. In New Jersey, for the longest time, transportation has been the number one source of carbon dioxide, and that's just because of the fact that we have so much nuclear power in New Jersey. But it's only been the past 3 years that nationwide, transportation has surpassed electricity generation. And as we continue to invest in renewable energy, be it offshore wind or onshore wind or solar, you're going to see that gap continue to grow where transportation looms larger and larger and larger. So if you participate once again in this challenge here in New Jersey, you're setting yourself up for a national reputation and an ability to have a much broader market. And you know that Congress is already talking about economy-wide being carbon-free by 2050. And it's no longer just about the power sector. People are recognizing that there are other sectors that need attention. So if you do it here and you do it this year and you do it first in New Jersey, there's a much bigger world out there for you.
Yeah, and I love that. We can do it first in New Jersey where, TechUnited has taken some stances and roles where we believe we can have a differentiated advantage. We believe this is one of those areas. And so if you're a startup working on something around electrified transportation, this is a place where you have a friendly ear and potentially a friendly partner.
Right. And that's something we talked about last year, Aaron, that I think merits repetition. The first place prize, I know WEX has used that money and that's been helpful to them, but that's not really the prize, right? The prize is the brand recognition, the alpha or beta site, whatever phase you're in, and the imprimatur that comes with, at the risk of sounding immodest, a highly respected company like PSEG using your product, and then your ability to use that as you knock on the door of others and the market opportunity. I mean, we're going to be investing as a utility $166 million in electric vehicles in the next few years, courtesy of the Board of Public Utilities, right? So it's the beyond the prize and the opportunity that follows that I think matters the most.
And wouldn't it be great if that happens with New Jersey-based companies in our backyard that creates jobs, that creates the cycle of economic improvement that we hope to have happen here?
Absolutely.
So last question, we represent this community of entrepreneurs. I believe you're pretty comfortable in your current role, but if you were to leave, what kind of a company would you start today? What sort of product or service would you bring to market? And I'm curious what you might even name your startup if you were to consider starting one.
So if I were to start today, there'd be one of three areas that I would go into. One would either be energy storage, whether that's for mobile applications or for fixed applications. I'm not sure that the grudging progress we're making on batteries is going to get us where we need to go, but that would certainly be another area. A second would be a company that was just brilliant at building models around data analytics, and whether the data analytics were how to maintain the grid more intelligently or how to optimize the route for my self-driving vehicle. I might go into that area. But in terms of a name for company, I would call it the super duper nice company. super duper environmentally friendly company.
Well, what people don't know is I told you more as a joke that it must include super duper in the title, but I really love super duper nice. It would be great. The super duper nice data company would be pretty cool.
Super duper sustainability company. SC or company. I don't know.
Well, maybe we can learn more about the super duper sustainability. We're going to bring you back shortly. But right now, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to send you backstage. We're going to turn next to Rob Capito and hear some of his views. He's the co-founder and president of BlackRock. But Ralph, we'll see you again shortly. Thanks again.
Great seeing you. Thank you.